Hello, everyone.
Hi, hello.
Nancy. Hey, Nancy.
Hello.
Hey, John. Hey, Diana. Hey,
Hello,
Melissa.
congratulations.
Thank you. Hey, Jen. So we're just sort of getting ourselves settled in here as people continue to trickle in. Um, Lisa's here. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Tonight, we're here to celebrate the launch of this baby. Got my contributors' copies. I think we all got our contributors' copies. Um, so a little bit about how things are going to go tonight. I'm just going to open things up once we get a few more people that are popping in. I'm just going to open things up and talk a little bit about the book, what it's about, its history, where it came from. And then I'm going to go around and introduce our contributors. We have five folks here tonight. H.E. Edgman was supposed to join us, but had some health issues and isn't able to come. But we still have five contributors here. And so I'm going to introduce people, ask them to read just a small passage or so from their story. And then we'll ask a few questions about their work and their inspiration, why they chose the monster they chose to write about. And then I think, see how that goes and maybe open things up to your questions. And maybe if they have questions for each other, we'll see how that goes. So it's going to be very loose and informal, and hopefully a lot of fun. So without further ado, I'm Rob Costello. I'm the contributing editor of We Mostly Come Out at Night, 15 Queer Tales of Monsters, Angels, and Other Creatures. This book was originally titled Queer Beasties, back when it went out on proposal. And I actually love the new title so much better than the original title. I couldn't be happier with it. So the idea for this book, basically, I've always loved monsters ever since I was a boy. I've been fascinated by monsters. And as I grew older, I sort of realized that monsters are kind of queer, just innately queer. They're much like queer folks. They've always been treated as the other. They're on the outside of society. And so there was always this connection in my mind between monsters and queerness. And when I decided I wanted to try my hand at an anthology, um, I knew I wanted to do something having to do with monsters and queerness. And the idea that monsters could be an empowering symbol for queerness for young readers really captivated me. And so that's basically where the idea came from. Um, Worked with my agent to put together a proposal. I reached out to a bunch of people, writers I knew that I admired their work, to see if they might be interested in contributing stories. In fact, Merc, who's joining us here tonight, was very gracious. They let me use one of their stories as a sample for the proposal. It's a wonderful story. I absolutely love. They ended up writing something different for the book. But without the sample stories, we probably wouldn't have been able to sell it. And so we went out to a bunch of editors, and Brittany Pirelli, who is here tonight. Thank you, Brittany. Uh, uh, Editor at Running Press. She acquired it, and 2.5 years later, here we are. So it's been a tremendous labor of love for me. I can honestly say of all the creative projects I've ever worked on, I'm proudest of this book for any number of reasons. The people, all of the contributors just brought their A game, the most tremendous stories, a tremendous work ethic. Everybody was so open to the concept and so committed. to giving their all, their best work. I'm so proud of every single story in the book. And then working with Running Press has been a dream. Brittany is wonderful. The whole team at Running Press is wonderful. They, everything that I wanted, they gave me, including the fabulous cover and spectacular illustrations by the illustrator James Fenner, who just absolutely magnificent work. The book, the book is filled with just the best illustrations. And so I'm tremendously pleased with that. So I'm really excited by this project, and I hope it finds its way into the hands of the readers who need it. So that's really all I wanted to say. Just a little brief bit of background about the book. Let's see. I'll go around really quickly and introduce. I'll say your name and wave for the contributors, and then we'll start going around with the readings. So first, since you're next to me on the screen, Shae Carys, why don't you say hello, wave? Thank you. Okay. Next, S. Maxfield. Thank you. Then the next is Merc Fenn Wolfmoor. Thank you. Mike Ford. Awesome. Thank you. And then Val Howlett. Great. Thank you so much. So let's start with Shae, since you were first up. And I'll read your bio. Shae Carys, she, her, has spent her life being weird. It's her firm opinion not only that being normal is vastly overrated, but also that normal doesn't exist. Shae identifies with all weirdlings and encourages them to find their own people and their own joy. It's not easy sometimes, but it's worth it. Shae has contributed short stories to the anthology 13 Candles, as well as Rural Voices, 15 Authors Challenge Assumptions About Small Town America. Her writing also includes a variety of articles for Horror Hound magazine, as well as work for Ann Tainter. She has 2 small, feisty dogs. And Shae wrote an absolutely swoon-worthy story that I absolutely love called A Serpent and a Wish. And so if you'd like to read a short passage from that.
I have a very short passage.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. She followed the light, dazzled by its beauty. The serpent wove around her fingers, her arm, as if eager to finally be in its home. Once she was certain she traveled far enough into the forest, she paused. Closing her eyes, she listened. It was beautiful. Birds, their songs and wing beats between the high branches, the scrabbling of tiny paws, chittering in foreign animal tongues, the soft creaks of the stalwart trees as they swayed in the slight breeze, the rustling of their leaves. No voices, no yelling, no crying. Peace. For as much as she had always been surrounded by the people of the village, she had always been alone.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. So your story, the monster in your story is actually a gorgon, but not a traditional sort of Greek mythology based gorgon. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your monster and why you chose to write about that?
So I was really fascinated with Greek mythology when I was growing up. And I had seen the movie Clash of the Titans when I was very young. And I absolutely loved Medusa and could not understand why this hunk was coming in and cutting off her head. Like, I just couldn't understand it. Like, what had she done? She turned people into statues, but that wasn't her fault. And so I feel like in the feminist movement, there's been this reclaiming of Medusa's story and of Gorgons. And I wanted to take the essence of what I felt a Gorgon kind of was, that connection to nature. Oh my gosh, sorry about my dog. No peace. But I wanted to take that connection to nature and kind of explore that in a way that was more peaceful at its being, because Gorgons aren't really they're monsters, but they don't have to be destructive. Like turning somebody into stone isn't really destructive. It's just they get turned into stone. And my Gorgons turn people into trees. But I also have I have this medallion of Medusa that is because she is she's the patron goddess of healing, of medicine for women. So I really kind of drew that association in my brain of that kind of just that connection. It just came together that way. And I really, really liked it because I love transformation stories. So especially when they come from within. So
awesome. That's wonderful. Yeah, your story was so original. Like it was just a completely different take on the idea of a Gorgon. So I'm wondering, like, what was the hardest thing about writing your story for you? What did you struggle most with, and what do you love most about it? It's a two-part question.
So I started the story and it took place in Chicago and was about like a punk rock girl who had snakes for her
Wow.
hair. So the hardest part that I always find in fiction is narrowing my story idea down, is figuring out what I actually like, what the core of the story is, and then building from there instead of I have this cool image. It's like punk rock Medusa, like let's do that, and then it just doesn't come together because it's just an image. It's not there's not that story at the center of it that builds out. So that was the hardest part for me, was really kind of getting it focused in on what was the kernel, what was the seed that I wanted to plant that would grow into the story. So my favorite part about it was that I got to write like this just really gentle, very positive story about queer love that I don't think a lot of there isn't a lot out there. There's more now than there was when I was growing up. That's for certain, because all of the queer stories I read growing up ended in tragedy. Like that's just it. It was just the curse of the tragic gay, as my friends would say. Like it's always there's always like somebody dies or they break up but yeah, I was really happy that I got to write something that had a happy ending and that was really sweet. Like it was meaningful and it was sweet and just gentle. Like I don't write gentle fiction.
Yeah.
Ever. I write very big feelings and very loud feelings. So this is a departure, but it was really, really nice to do. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do it.
Oh, I'm so pleased that you said yes. And so before we go, I just want to ask you, what do you hope that young queer readers take from your story? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but
yeah, the biggest thing is that no matter where you are, no matter what you like, who you are, because my character's an outsider for more than one reason. Like she's an outsider because she has a port wine birthmark on her face, which very outwardly shows people that she is different. And so people treat her poorly for that because they think, oh, she's cursed. It takes place in like medieval times. So people would very easily believe that. And so, she is othered in so many ways. But in the end, she still finds her person and she finds her people and she finds her place. And I really do think that there's a place for all of us. There's a place for all queer people. Like there's a good place. Like there is a good place, I promise. It's just you have to find it. You need to seek it wherever that may be, even if it's in your hometown, even if it's not in your hometown. There are places. There are oases. And like we were talking about before, I think that the loudest voices are the most negative, but we only notice them because they're so loud. And there are so many more voices that are lifting us up and building us up and saying, I support you. I am not about this negativity and I'm not about this. You're doing terrible things. And anyway, everybody here knows exactly what I'm talking about, the climate. But yeah, so that's what I hope people take from it, is that you have a place and you have people and they love you.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So thank you, Shae. I think we'll go next to S. Maxfield, since She's right next to Shae on my screen. It's the only order that I have. So let me start by introducing S. Maxfield. She, her is a queer, bi, disabled storyteller with deep roots in dance. Her work has taken many forms, and she's currently writing a series of comic strips and a flurry of flash fiction. Oh, that's hard to say. Her story, Buried Treasure, recently won second place in Voyage YA's Flash Fiction Contest. And she was also selected as a semifinalist in the Flash Fiction Contest hosted by Cast of Wonders. Sarah lives in Lenapehoking, Brooklyn, I'm sorry, with her family and their imaginary cat. And S's story is an absolutely delightful story called How We Founded Club Feathers at the Discard Depot. And it's really different. So I'm gonna ask to go ahead and read a short passage, and then we'll ask a few questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Rob. Yes, I have more pronouns and a different name than when this went to press. So, hey. All right, here is a little bit of this one. One of the chaperones rushes to take charge, grabbing for the end of a wing with his fists. Go back to wherever you came from. We don't. I've heard rants like this a million times before, and they're usually lengthy, so it's striking that he cuts out mid-sentence, slumping to the ground as if asleep. His hand rolls open on the floor, revealing the quill end of a giant feather embedded in his finger. The new voice echoes from everywhere. How disappointing. But we mustn't fret, mes petits choux. There will always be those who prefer to slumber in lullabies than awaken to their strangeness. No matter. I'm not here for them.
Excellent. I love the dramatic reading.
Well, I do
Perfect.
have a degree in theater.
Yeah. So you hint at the character of the monster, but it isn't really clear from the sample you just read. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your monster and why you selected her?
Sure. So I feel like first I have to say that I initially sent Rob a totally different story, which was something that I had previously written in a different context, but that happened to have like kaiju swans. So I was like, oh, perfect. I can use this kaiju swan story. But they were kind of like a backdrop and like not really part of the main thing. And I had written that as like a much longer, like a flash series. So trying to shoehorn it into a short story was just not happening. And and so when Rob told me that was not happening, I was like, well, who's my monster? Like, who is my queer monster? And I thought of Caraboss, who is the so-called wicked fairy from Sleeping Beauty, which is Caraboss's real name pre-Disney. Um, and that for me, growing up as like a ballet bunhead, which was, a real world of binary in so many ways and so many rules and so much restriction. When I was little, we did the ballet of Sleeping Beauty, and I remember the the teen, who seemed like an adult to me, who performed this role of Caraboss, and it was like an absolute like my mind was blown because this character and this dancer broke all the rules of everything you were supposed to do within like the molds of ballet. And I just remember being like so amazed and like enthralled by both the character and this girl who was dancing the role because everything was just so queer, like so queer. Like, and I didn't, I wouldn't have had those words at the time, but that thinking back of like that was really a moment for me of like this monstrous, wicked, powerful, like edge of something that I was like, that feels like me, these pink tights, I don't know, but that I want that. So that was the monster that I went to. And I also kind of mixed in terms of the way that the monster shows up in the story, I gave Caraboss these huge wings, like big owl or hawk wings, which is kind of a mix with another ballet villain, which is von Rothbart from Swan Lake, who's like an owl person. Because when I was a teen, I actually got to play von Rothbart, so I got my dream of being cast as the villain in a ballet. And so I sort of merged them together and gave Caraboss these awesome huge wings as well.
And a wicked sense of humor.
Yes. Well, yeah, that also, I mean, there's this story for me, there's a lot of things in here, but one of the elements of it is that it's really like a love letter to the performance world, to the theater community, as well as like my ballet days as a little baby dancer. And like, specifically like, queer performance artists and drag performers and like people that I knew and really took me in when I first moved to New York City. And there's one performer in particular that I was like, I want to write this character as if it's like a role that they would want to play. Like I want to make, and so that was very much in my head, this sort of wit and clever snark is yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So what was the biggest challenge writing this story, and what are you proudest of? What are you happiest with about
I
about
mean,
it?
one of the things that was challenging about it, I think, was trying to find this balance between, I wanted it to be a really joyful, fun story where like these kids who are at this prom and feeling absolutely like trapped there in this like, watered down cotillion, as they call it, that, they get to have their like queer prom fantasy. Um, but I also wanted it to feel like it existed in reality, so to find this balance between like there's real issues that the kids in the world of the story are facing that are connected to the real issues that we're experiencing, and that they're
Mhm.
I think the hardest thing was to try to find some like believability with the difficulties, but also not have it kind of hamper the joy that they get to experience.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. And what are you proudest of?
Oh, my playlist. No, I'm kidding. um I mean, I'm just like I read it again today and it made me cry again. Like it just I feel like I'm proudest of like, because I think, the first story you were like, no, try again. And I really connected to something genuine for me. And, I think writing this story and really being honest about like some of these like feelings that like I still have, even though I'm not a teenager anymore and I'm still getting to know myself and
Mhm.
understanding myself in community and in relationships and intersections of queerness, that like I feel like I did, sometimes it's hard to really tap into that honesty for our own emotional states, and I feel like I managed to get at least some of that in there. That's
Mhm.
true.
Awesome. That's awesome. And so the final question is, what do you hope readers take away from your story?
uh Comfort and joy. Tidings of comfort and joy. Feeling connected, feeling, and also maybe, there's there's an element of this that, even though the monster kind of saves the day, it's really about the kids, being brave enough to kind of be seen by each other, that they create
Mhm.
this community that then they can maintain even after the monstrous moment disappears. So I'm hoping that that's also something that can be taken away, that, I mean, we're good at creating community and like holding it together and like teach the babies that that's, how it goes. So yeah,
Kind of have to be, yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And thanks, Brittany. Thanks, everybody. This is so exciting.
So I think next up on my screen is Mike Ford. So you're up, Mike. Michael Thomas Ford, he, him, is the author of numerous books for both young readers and adults. His novels for teenagers include Every Star That Falls, Love and Other Curses, and Suicide Notes. A 5-time winner of the Lambda Literary Award for LGBTQ books, he's also been a finalist for the Shirley Jackson Award, the Bram Stoker Award, the Ignite Award, and the Firecracker Alternative Book Award. He lives in rural Ohio with his husband and dogs, where he gardens, collects flannel shirts, and waits patiently for Mothman to pay him a visit. So, Mike, if you're there, yeah, there you are.
I am here.
why don't, your story is entitled Be Not Afraid. Why don't you go ahead and read a short passage and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. My copy has not yet arrived. It's sitting in Indiana, apparently, according to the yes. So I have to read off my screen, so excuse me for staring blankly at you. Take out all the yellow ones, Mama says. Put these in. She takes a box of Christmas bulbs out of the plastic grocery sack from the Dollar General and sets it on the kitchen table beside the tangled strings of lights I'm trying my best to work apart. They're lined with green, blue, red, and yellow bulbs. What color do you want me to replace them with? I ask her. Don't matter, she says, and takes a draw on the cigarette in her mouth. She blows the smoke out and it settles over the table like smog. I wish she would quit, but she won't, even though her cough has been getting worse and worse. She won't go to the doctor anymore either because, as she says, he don't know nothing I don't already know. What she means is that she's probably going to die before too long. Maybe not next month or even next year, but more likely than not, she won't be around to see me graduate from high school in 2 years. But that's not something we talk about. Just like we don't talk about what will happen to me and Pike if she does. With our parents gone, she's the only relative we have. Since Pike is 18 and technically an adult, I guess he'll be in charge of taking care of things then. Except that Pike is the one who needs taken care of, and I've been looking out for myself since I was 12. As much as I love Mama, and I love her more than just about anything, she's not exactly a caretaker either. Most of the time, I feel like the only adult in the house, and I'm not even old enough to drive. Shouldn't we be replacing the red ones, I say? I thought his eyes were red. Mama shakes her head, taps her ash into the empty AL8 1 can beside her. That statue they got over in Point Pleasant makes everyone think that, she says. Those Blanco glass eyes and all, but they're yellow. She pauses, takes another puff of her cigarette. At least they were when I seen him. I suppose he might look different to different people. Him. What she means is Mothman, but we don't say his name around here. Mama thinks it's bad luck. One time, maybe a year after our parents died, I did say it, and she slapped my face so hard I couldn't breathe for half a minute. I just stood there looking at her face, all twisted up in anger and fear. Don't, she said, don't call him. Not ever.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So I think people can guess that your story, the monster you selected for your story is Mothman, and I know. Yeah, so why don't you talk about that? Why you selected Mothman?
Well, if I can make this work, I don't know if you can see over in the corner. The light's in the way. See that fellow lurking back?
That's it.
Yeah. That's our 6-foot statue of Mothman. And because this is Appalachia, it was probably carved with a chainsaw. Yeah, I have loved Mothman. I think I learned about Mothman from that Richard Gere movie with Deborah Messing. I think Deborah Messing was in it. I can't remember now. But anyone who lives in Appalachia, particularly Southeast Ohio, West Virginia, knows about Mothman. He's our resident cryptid, and we're about half an hour from the Mothman Museum in West Virginia. So he's everywhere.
And he resonates with you just because he's local, or is there something particular about the lore that you really like?
I like the lore of him. I like that he is. It's funny, you know, monsters have a way of being turned into this kawaii, cutesy kind of thing, no matter how awful they are. And Mothman definitely has done that, but I like that he really has this heart, this sinister heart to him. He's a warning, you know, he doesn't do anything himself, but he comes to tell you, watch out, something's coming. And I find that really interesting. Because is he good or is he bad, right? Is he there so that you can change? You know, I like to look at him as he comes so that you can change things, as opposed to I'm bringing something terrible to happen to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you leave that somewhat open-ended by the end of the story, which is very interesting. So what was hardest for you in writing this story, and what are you happiest about? What are you proudest of?
The hardest thing about writing about rural people, I did not grow up in Appalachia. I grew up in the Adirondacks, which is just the New York version. But the hardest part about writing about people like us is doing it without becoming a caricature,
Mhm.
because so much of it is true, like most caricatures, a lot of it is very, very accurate. And so you want to reflect that in your characters without making fun of them, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, makes perfect sense.
So that was the hardest part. Anytime you write in anything remotely resembling dialect, it's really tricky
Mhm.
without coming across as fake. What was the rest? There was another question, I think.
And what are you proudest of or happiest with?
What I am happiest with is that I seem to have created two characters that people want to know more about. This is the first short story I've written where multiple people have said, I want a novel about this kid.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really the nicest thing anyone can ever say to you about a character that you create, is that they want to know more about them.
Yeah, I could definitely see this being expanded into a longer story. Do you have any plans for that? Are you tempted?
I am tempted. I once you reach a certain age and you realize you have only a certain amount of time left, you start prioritizing what you want to do. So, I mean, I've been a writer for 5 years now, something like that. And it was always easy to just do whatever, oh yeah, I'll do that, say yes to
Mhm.
everything. But now I'm really thinking about, what's my shelf life, and what do I want to do with the time that's remaining? And writing about characters like him in places like this is one of those things. So yeah, I would love to do a novel about him.
Awesome. That's very exciting. Well, you'll let me read it. I'll be a beta reader. You have the offer, it's there. And so before we move on, what do you hope readers take away from your story? There's a lot there.
I want them to take away hope in two things. One, that change is possible, and what they want out of their lives is possible, but also on a bigger level, that there is wonder alive in the world. I am the 55-year-old man who still pokes the back of every coat closet to see if it's snowing back there and there's a lamppost.
Mhm.
And I still want to get a knock on the door one day and some mysterious stranger is standing there saying, I have something to tell you. Um, and so that's what I want readers to still believe in too. And I want them to
Awesome.
think that all these things are possible for them.
No, that's wonderful. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. So let's move on to Merc. Hey,
Hi.
Merc. So
I
let
don't
me
know
get
if
your
you're
bio.
probably saying this is Tater Tot.
Oh,
He's here to help.
adorable. Yes, awesome. Yeah, my little guy was stomping around. You may have heard him before, Silas. So let me do your intro. Merc Fenn Wolfmoor, they, them, is a queer non-binary writer from Minnesota, where they live with their two cats, one of whom we just met. Merc is the author of several short story collections, as well as the novella, The Wolf Among the Wild Hunt. They have had short stories published in such fine venues as Lightspeed, Fireside, Nightmare, Apex, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Escape Pod, Uncanny, and multiple Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy anthologies. And so Merc's story is entitled The Girl with 13 Shadows. And so I'll let you go ahead and read a short passage, and then we'll talk about it.
All right. I was very excited to see my copies came today, so I have this in front of me. I can fix you. That's the first thing the doctor says. Not even a hello. Behind the disposable mask, you can't tell if he's smiling. His eyes are sharp blue like a new highlighter. That's what we all want, your dad says, squeezing your hand. You nod, keeping your shadows carefully aligned so it looks like only one under the fluorescent lights. You already tried to be normal. You tried so hard and it just didn't work, and you're scared you're broken forever. The doctor waves you toward the examination table. You bite the inside of your cheek, your stomach in little knots. You're 19, and this is the first time you've been to a doctor since you were small and got your booster shots. You have no idea what to expect. All you know is that the neatly groomed man with intense eyes is a professional, the only one of his kind. You're lucky he had room in his schedule to treat you, but most important, he's going to fix you. First of all, the doctor says, tell me what kind of monster you are.
Awesome. Thank you. So your story is interesting and your monster is interesting in that it kind of is a sequel to a different story. So do you want to talk about like the genesis of your monster and the
Yeah,
genesis
sure.
of the story?
So the story is sort of a companion to my story, Monster Girls Don't Cry, which was published in Uncanny, like, oh man, years ago. Time is fake, I can't remember, but and that one was about about monster girls and like finding each other and dealing with societal pressures, and then basically learning to embrace their identities instead of trying to hide, because that's what normal society thinks they should do. So this one is a character, she's got 13 shadows, like the title says. And she's also learning that she's asexual. And so a lot of the story is about discovering she's ace, and then how that kind of fits in with a larger society, which has a lot of very sort of it expects a lot of sexualized performance, especially from female coded people. And so she's trying to figure out like where she fits in the world and how to be herself when everybody thinks she should be something else. So it has a lot of feelings, because I'm also ace, and writing that was of her like discovering this was it was challenging to kind of convey some of the like nuances that I kind of wanted it to hit on without being like I guess super just like I don't even know what the word I'm looking for, but just kind of like writing it just so like as a story of discovery, and then learning to accept yourself as who you are is a big part of the story. And that was and then she also has shadows that can eat people, so you know.
She's very cool.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched a little bit on what was challenging. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more, and then maybe talk about what you're happiest with or
Yeah,
proudest
sure.
of?
Yeah, so it was definitely challenging writing a standalone story that was essentially linked in many ways with a previously published story, which is actually what Rob had approached me with, that he liked Monster Girls Don't Cry and was wondering if that could be either part of the anthology or something, you know, similar to that. So, which is very cool, and I'm still very, very thrilled that it all worked out. But yeah, it was definitely a balancing act of trying to sync up certain events that I wanted to happen in the story, while also making it self-contained, so you don't have to have read the other story. If you do, they kind of make a sort of a larger world that you could enjoy, but it's not necessary. So that was definitely a challenge. I don't think I'd really encountered that before, because most of my stories are just standalone anyway. So writing something that was interconnected while still being its own thing was an interesting challenge.
And what are you happiest with?
Honestly, that I got it done, because it was there was a couple of months in there where it was just like everything was just happening all at once, and so hitting the deadlines finally was tough at times. But yeah, I'm really happy about how it turned out overall, and super excited about the company I'm in this anthology. So I'm excited to read all the rest of it.
Since we talked about a little bit about this with Mike, and it just makes perfect sense to ask this, would you consider expanding even further, because you have this world now? with these monster characters? Would you consider another story or a novel or a novella in the same world?
I would definitely consider other stories set in this world, because there's one character in there. He's kind of like a werewolf,
Mhm.
but he's
Yeah.
also ace, and he connects with the main character, so they become friends. But yeah, there's a lot of things I think would be fun to explore in other stories, but I don't really have ideas that would expand beyond the short story form, which
Mhm.
is probably good because I have too much going on.
I can totally relate to that. And so before we move on, what do you hope readers take away from your story?
I really hope that, especially young queer ace writers who maybe don't have words yet or are still discovering themselves, can take away the message that you are not broken and you don't have to fix yourself. You are perfect just the way you are, even though it is hard to make society recognize that. But there's nothing wrong with you. It's the world that's
Mhm.
wrong.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And then our last contributor that we're going to hear from is Val Howlett. And I will read Val's bio. Val Howlett, they, them, is a folktale lover, a curious researcher, and a book florist. Val is a recipient of the Catherine Patterson Prize for YA. Their fiction has appeared in Lunch Ticket, Hunger Mountain, and the anthology Absolutely Normal, short stories that smash mental health stereotypes. And Val's story is entitled How to Summon Me. And I will turn it over to Val to read a brief passage from the story.
Thanks. Thank you, Rob. I also am reading from another screen because I'm at a friend's house and I don't have my contributor copy. So hopefully it's at home. Hopefully it has landed there. My story is like broken up into, you can't see that. It's broken up into little sections. So I'm going to read the first little section. It's sort of like an instruction manual. How to begin. Say my name 13 times, not 7, not 9. I have been through periods where almost everyone gets the number wrong. Most recently, it was 3. I kept hearing that triple chant, felt faint little tugs from below, but I did not fall and I could not see the glass or humans on the other side. Light candles. There is no specific number required. I like the symmetry of 2, the way they look like 2 morsels floating out of reach, or 3, 2 tall candles with the shorter one in between. There's a baleful beauty in that shape. There should be no other light around you. The lights in your world are too bright. They won't allow me to see you, and you certainly won't see me. Chant in unison if you are more than one. Don't rush through it. This is especially important to remember if you are alone. Those who call me in solitude tend to mumble or chant too quickly as if they want it to be over. Why? Remember, I am moving through a regular day on my world, chasing morsels, picking fruit, cleaning waste. You are the one summoning me. Do not hold each other's hands, or do if you'd like, but you do not need to, nor do you need to add flourishes or try to sing. Just repeat the name humans have given me again and again.
Awesome. So this is a little tricky because the name humans have given will reveal the monster's identity, but it's kind of withheld throughout the story. So I don't know, how much do you want to talk about your monster?
That's funny. Yeah, I was like, should we say it? I don't know.
It's up to you. It's your story.
I'll see if I can try to talk about it
Okay.
without saying it, and we'll see. So tell you about my monster.
Yeah. Why you selected that monster and what inspired you there?
Well, like I think another contributor here, I wrote a different story first about vampires, and it was a little dark and maybe a little too adult, we decided. So then I was like, oh God, what am I gonna write instead? And I wrote this one because I wanted to try writing like I love reading stories that are a form, you know, like that are written like a recipe or a list, but it's really like telling you something. So I wanted to do that. And my monster is someone who people have tried to summon in various ways. So like it was a good way in because there are ways to do it. There's like a million different ways that people say the superstitions vary. So that's always fun. So that's why I went with this one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that the structure, the form is really fun. It's exciting. It's different. So I wondered if that was what attracted you to writing about this particular
Yeah, and I was
character.
scared too because I write really long short stories, and I was like, I can't write another long one. Like I don't have much time, so it was like a way to keep it short too.
Very clever.
Ish.
Resourceful writer. So what are you proudest of in this story, and what was hardest for you to do?
Well, so my monster is not of this world, and that was cool, like a fun challenge, but also challenging because I didn't want it to feel like, I think when you're writing something really alien, there's a danger of like a disconnect with the reader because you know everything is so remote, and I wanted this character to feel very other, but I obviously wanted the reader to care about the character who like doesn't really have human, well, maybe has human emotions, maybe they're not the same, you know. So I think that was the hardest part. And I think the fun part was thinking about people who would summon my character throughout the ages, like sort of coming up with the human counterparts.
Yeah, unlike most of, not all of the stories, but unlike most of the stories, you're your story is told from the perspective of the monster, who is not queer, right? So there's like this sort of observational window on these young queer characters that the monster encounters, which is really interesting. Like it was a different take on the brief of the book, which I really enjoyed.
Totally. And also I think maybe, I don't know, because my monster doesn't have a gender. So maybe
Yeah.
the monster is queer.
Yeah,
like,
well, true. Oh, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's really cool. Oh, I'll have to think about that some more. Um, so what do you want readers to take away from your story?
I had to think about this one because that question always stumps me so much. I think because when I'm writing, I'm trying to do other things. Like I'm not trying to think about what the reader will take away, you know? And I hope with my work that the reader doesn't take away just one thing. But after thinking about it a bit, I was like, okay, well, my monster is sort of outside of time. So it encounters people who summon it throughout the ages. And one of my obsessions is like old timey gaze, because when I came out a million years ago, I felt like maybe I was like I was scared. I was like jumping onto a craze or a fad. Like I had no sense of history. And like, I don't know, years later, I found out like Susan B. Anthony was gay, and that like blew my mind, and it made me so mad that no one told me sooner. So I think it's that engagement with time that that we've always been here. And yeah, I think that's what I'd like readers to take away.
That's awesome. No, I really like that. I can totally see that. Totally see that. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you all for reading and for opening up and talking about your stories and answering my questions. So we have like about 10 minutes left. And so I'd love to open it up to everybody if people in the audience would like to ask questions of anybody in particular or talk about stories. Oh, Shelby raised her hand. Go ahead.
Okay, so I am asking this on behalf of my 12-year-old who doesn't want to be on camera, V. But they are gender fluid and they're not really finding anything, to read. And so they're really excited about this. We haven't gotten our copy yet, but they're really excited. But they wanted to know, like, what are the other stories that the contributors are reading, and what kind of their current influences are, as far as, sort of blazing this trail of writing these stories for, kids like them who don't have anything really else to do. I mean, they're really like looking for other stuff to read. So, yeah, so I was just wondering, or they were just wondering, where are you guys at, and what are you guys reading? And, where are you finding things that that would be that would reflect experiences like theirs?
If I could jump in.
Yeah, jump in.
So Nova Calum, they write epic space opera that has a lot of queer, non-binary, trans representation, and it's got a lot of feels. It's really a vast world, and I think they got 5 books out in their Stars and Green Magic series right now. And I'm pretty sure you can find it, Google it. But they have, really positive rep in the stories, and they're just a lot of fun. So if your kid is looking for like more of a space opera type thing, I would definitely recommend those.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm not a contributor, but I do read a lot of this. And I have to say, I'm like almost done with the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. And let me tell you, there's a lot of F-bombs, but I love this robot so much. And I think that like the diversity of the cast is amazing. And also I think it's like I resonate with this robot in a way that I think is unhealthy. And I think it's also helped me like understand a lot more about myself and the fact of like, sexuality and gender, and it's all kind of just what you make it and how you want to do it. So I'd recommend those. And I like that they're shorter, except for the 5th one, which is like a full length book, but they're all novellas, I think, otherwise, which is great. So Murderbot, my favorite.
Seconding, Murderbot's great.
Yeah. Anybody else? Shae, go ahead.
I'm not sure if this is necessarily age appropriate, but I am going back through a reread of the Sandman comic books, the graphic novels, and I absolutely love what they were for the time that they came out. Like, this was something that came out when I was first starting college, and actually teen years and college, and it's so open-minded. Like the entire premise and the magic and everything like that. Like there's gender fluid gods, there's trans representation, there's all of this stuff that was put into these stories that are these epic, beautiful, like fairy tale almost kind of myths. And so I really, obviously maybe wait a couple of years, but depends on the maturity of your kiddo, to be honest. Like there's nothing in them that I would consider to be like super alarming or anything like that, but I really do think that they're beautiful stories and told really, really well. But yeah, I need to catch up on my current literature, but I really just like the comfort of rereading my favorites sometimes. So.
That's great. Thank you. Does anybody else have any suggestions?
I can throw in another really great comic, like graphic novel, Thieves by Lucy Bryan. I can never remember if it's Bryan or Byron, so I'm looking at it to make sure. Bryan is really awesome. And also in like the comics world. And I feel like whenever I get this question, my mind goes blank.
Yeah.
But I did remember that I also just recently read Hell Followed With Us, which I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
So it also is a bit intense, so it kind of just depends on like the themes, but really like fantastic, like full of really cathartic rage. And yeah, I enjoyed that book a lot.
Great. Thank you. How about do we have any other questions? John, go ahead.
Thanks. So I think the idea of monsters as an overarching theme is terrific. There's so much to mine there. And when I think about monsters, I think of one interesting dimension is like, is this monster personal to me, or is this monster shared among like my culture, my community, and like from where does it draw its power? And you know, if it's shared, then it has all these hooks already built in, which you can latch onto and use as leverage when you're building your story and building your slice of this world. But if it's personal to you, then that offers all sorts of other different power. And so there's a tension between these two ideas. And I'm wondering for the contributors, for anybody else, how they found themselves negotiating this idea of the personal versus the shared when it comes to your monster.
That's a great question. Does anyone want to jump in? Go ahead, Az.
I can jump in on that one. Hi, John. I mean, I feel like I want to jump in because I had this other layer with my monster, which is that most people know the Wicked Fairy from Sleeping Beauty as Maleficent from the Disney movies. And so I was kind of working against the shared knowledge with like the version that fewer people know. And then also like I kind of made a hybrid version that was my own personal twist as well. So that was something that I was really actively playing with. And there's like a funny, I hope it's funny, there's an interaction that happens where where someone sort of makes the connection and is like, wait, you're Maleficent, and Carabas is like, no, that's not me. So I think there is something really interesting to play with that like shared knowledge and that connection to the power that people, what people are projecting onto the character in a way that like you don't always get to play with with other characters. So I think that was really an interesting and fun part of this.
That's great. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in? Go ahead, Shae.
So I know that I wrote about Gorgons, but I think the real monster in my story is feeling different. It's just feeling like you don't fit in. And I think that's such a universal feeling. If you think about Medusa as a figure, Medusa is just painted with one broad stripe. Like the Gorgon is painted with one broad stripe. They're just villains. They're just monsters. But then you go back and you look at the story of how the Gorgons came to be. Like literally, it's Medusa and then her sisters, and her sisters became Gorgons for who knows why. It's just like cool, they're Gorgons now. Hey sis, And I think that it's really so much about this personal aspect of being misunderstood and having people look at you a certain way and think that you're one thing, when really you have all of these multitudes and you can be something completely different underneath of what you look like, or how you present yourself, or how people view you. Even if you're not presenting in a certain way, people will view you a certain way. So I think that really, that personal trait in there. I mean, that's how I've always felt. I grew up in a small town, so I've just never felt like I fit in. It didn't even matter if I was queer. I just didn't fit in. And so taking that idea of this monster that just does not fit in, like literally, just unless she's with her sister, and she doesn't fit in with her sisters. Like that's the crazy thing about the Gorgons, like in mythology, is like the other two were super monstrous and not even human at all. And here's, Medusa, this beautiful figure of like half human, half snake, sort of. Yeah, I like snakes anyway. But I always like snakes. So, but yeah, I think that you make a really good point about that personal and that what everybody else sees, kind of that association coming together and maybe even clashing against one another, like with Carabas and Maleficent. I think that's a fantastic example. So yeah. Hopefully that made sense. I don't get to second draft this.
No, that makes sense. That was
Can
great.
I piggyback off that? I just want to say, yeah, like I think working with a culturally known monster, like naturally you get to play with people's expectations of what they think the monster is, and there's always going to be different ones. And with my monster also, it's like the monster shows up, they see the monster differently than the monster sees themselves. So it's like there's just the parallels are right there with that and queerness. So it's just like a good playground to play in.
Awesome. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we're just about out of time. So if maybe we can squeeze in one last question if anyone has one. And if not, I will thank everyone for coming tonight. Thank you to the contributors for reading. Thank you, Brittany, for letting me put you on the spot. And thank you for your support, everyone. And it was great to see you, and we really enjoyed this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. It was great to see you.
All right.
Really fun. Thank
Have
you
a good night.
Thank you.
This
Have
is
a good
great. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 I love how you're like putting me on the spot. I was muted the whole time. I literally said not a single thing.
Well, I made you wave, so
It's true. It's true.
I'm sorry, I made you wave.
It's all right. There.
All right. Well, take
Good
care,
luck.
guys.
Go down the
Have a
steps. See you later.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.